All right. So let's sit up nice and straight. You can have your hands closed eyes closed. Hands can be lightly resting in your lap. And let's just take a few easy breaths to clear the mind, calm the thoughts, calm the breath as we come into our space for our study today. And I'll ask you simply to repeat after me. Om. Om. I'm. Om. Hrim. Om. Shrim. Om. Krim. Om. Klim. Om. Hum. Om. Harim. Om. Stream. Om. Trim. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. So these 10 mantras are, all have specific energetics, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, but I thought it would be nice just to organically experience it today. So we're going to continue with the Sri Yantra and looking at a little bit more detail at the different forms, geometric forms within the yantra. So if you have your yantra with you or a picture of it, that would be nice to have as a reference point. Oh, I see somebody running. Oh, that was Heidi running to get hers. Okay. Let me go back. Okay. So as you look at your yantra, you will see, again, this is a review of what we did last week. The outer square represent anatomically the feet. So these are the gates into the yantra, the circle part. Then you have the, which is not shown here, but you have 3 thin circles that represents time, past, present, and future. And then you come into the circle with the 16 lotus petals, the 8 lotus petals. And then once we're within the triangle, you'll see that this is also relating to the chakras. So you have the outer 14 triangles for the Svadhisthana chakra, then the 10 triangles, Manipura, another 10 triangle circle of Anahata, 8 triangles of the Vishuddhi chakra. The inner downward facing triangle is the Ajna, and then you have the crown chakra right there at the Bindu, which is the Shiva Shakti mergence. And this reference here that I think it was on last week's video also is Sarah Tomlinson. This is her explanation. But there's many ways to look at the Sri Yantra. So let's go back again to some of the basics. So if you look at your Sri Yantra, you will notice that there are 5 downward facing. Oops, sorry, let me just see, Natalie's having problems. Darn it. Natalie, I'm sorry. Yes, we will record this and hopefully the signal will get better for you. If you look at your yantra right now, you'll see there are 5 triangles pointing downward and 4 pointing up, and they form 43 triangles plus the central triangle altogether. All these numbers become important depending on how you want to use the yantra for meditation. So the 5 Shakti triangles, which are the Devi triangles or the downward facing, they represent creation. The 4 Shiva or masculine or Purusha triangles that are going up is dissolution. Because remember in Tantra, the belief system is that life is in circles and cycles. There's creation and dissolution over and over and over again. And so this is the triangles, not only the triangles going up and down and intersecting, but the circles also represent that concept of a cyclical life. So then the union of Shaktis, the 5 Shakti triangles and the 4 form the chakra of evolution, creation and evolution. At the center, and this is not always seen in all of the depictions, but in the center of the Sri Yantra, you find the Bindu. But there's also 3 more Bindus in the corners of that triangle. So you have one is colored red, one is white, and one is a mixed color. You'll see the name Kamakala. That is the name of the Bindu in the Sri Yantra. The red Bindu is called Kurukula, which is the female form. The white Bindu is Varhayi, the male. And then the Bindu of the union of Shiva and Shakti is sometimes yellow in the middle. All right, we've already gone over this. You have 43 triangles, and you have the 16 petals and the 8 petals. And what we didn't talk about too much is that the outer gates are called Bhupura, and the circles of time are Vritas, and we'll come back to that. We've spoken about this, that the Sri Yantra is also known as the yantra for Tripura Sundari or Lalita. So let's look at some of the qualities, we'll review them again, of this goddess. So she is the presiding deity of the Sri Chakra or Sri Yantra, same thing. Lalita is the one who plays, because remember, she represents all of creation, manifested and unmanifested, evolving and in dissolution. She represents all of that. She also represents beauty and the beauty of the 3 worlds. The 3 worlds meaning the gross earthly manifestation, the astral, and the causal world in the universe. As ruler of all, she is the ruler of the 3 gunas. Remember, Sattvic, Rajas, and Tamas, which is also related to sun, moon, and fire. It's also related to the zodiac planets. And I think the reference that Annette gave of Sarah and Sarah Tomlinson in the book, I think that she references some of the zodiac planets in her yantras. These words you're going to see again, especially if you delve deeper into Sri Yantra meditation practice, which is why I wanted to include it. Tripura means will, Icha means knowledge, Jhana means action, Kriya. And these 3 words are repeated a lot once you start studying this meditation practice here, especially when you're looking at the 3-dimensional practice of the Sri Yantra, the Meru. We can also talk again in terms of 3 as intellect, your feelings, and physical sensations. She is the 3 states of the soul or consciousness: awake, dreaming, and the sleep states. Remember, again, that all goes back to this image of Om. Remember, all the different curves within Om represent different states of consciousness of the human experience. Her 5 triangles. The downward facing triangles are the Panchatattvas and the Panchabhutas. So this goes right back to the very first day when we looked at the diagram of Samkhya and the evolutes within Samkhya. And I think I have another diagram coming up to show that again. A little bit more literally and easier to understand is she holds 5 flowery arrows, which are either the five, usually the five elements. She has a noose, a goad, and the bow. So the noose represents attachment, the goad represents repulsion, the sugarcane bow represents the mind, and the flowery arrows are the five sense objects. So I was wrong there. Okay, so now we're getting into a little bit more detail that may or may not serve you right now, but it's good to know. So if you take your yantra, take that top triangle that's pointing at you. The bottom right-hand side is guarded by Lord Ganesha. So now I'm talking about the square, okay? The bottom left side is Lord Surya. Surya is sun. The top left side is guarded by Lord Vishnu. He's usually the god of sustaining. And the top right corner is Lord Shiva. Now, the 8 directions are guarded by 8 lokapalas. These are different guards. So here I have just listed here, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, whatever, the names of the guards. So this might be interesting to you if you, when you're looking at different images, and you'll see either their names or their mantras and go, well, who are these people? Well, these are different gods guarding the different corners of the Sri Yantra. So here we have what I'm talking about. Here are the corners and the directions. Interestingly, in the next one, we see the goddesses also. So we can also look at goddesses as representing different directions. This is the square. These are the portals. These three portals are known collectively as Burpura. Another word that we haven't talked about yet is Avarana. So Avarana, there are 9 of them. So Sarah Thomason calls them the 9 circuits. They're also the 9 levels of consciousness. They can be perceived as, when you're meditating, as the different levels of consciousness to cross or go through or ascend or descend, depending if you're looking at a 3-dimensional Meru or if you're looking at the 2-dimensional yantra like we are. Your line of sight and your focus, whether it's through mantra or image or just a thought, will be going in and out, up and down through these 9 circuits. So the first circuit is Burpura, and the letters and all this stuff on this image will make more sense because they're all guarded by somebody. I'll get there in the next line. Okay, here we have, you can clearly see in white, brown, and yellow, the 3 outer lines. These are the vrutas. These are the 3 circles that surround the 16-petal circle. These 3 circles represent time. And they also represent, again, that basic concept of the cyclical nature of time and of life within Tantra. The second Avarana is the 16-petal circle. That is known as Sarvash Paripuruka Chakra, the fulfiller of all desires. And very interesting, a way to meditate and use mantra is that each of the 16 petals represent one of the 16 vowel sounds within Sanskrit. So you can go through them. Remember when we did e, u, ring, ring, aim, I'm, ka, ha, ga, na, and all the way through? Okay, it's the same thing. You can use, well, I just said some consonants, but you can use the vowels and go all the way through. The third Avarana, is the 8 petals. This is Sarvashan Shobhana chakra. And this is the presiding form of the goddess Lalita. So here, this part really represents Tripura Sundari within the 8 petals. The Bija mantra of this one is Hreem Kleem Sao. Now, here I have the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th circuit, or different levels of consciousness. I put it here because it's in bigger font, but it's also on this image here. And it's a little more helpful to see it because it's color-coded. So we just did the 16 petals and the 8 petals, and now we're into the blue triangles on the outside. That's the 4th avarana, 14 triangles. They are the 14 main nadis, or energy channels in the human body. They have a bija mantra, Haim Kalim Hasao. I've given the reference on the top of this page because it is an incredibly detailed and very, very good reference. I've just given a very, very short summary to each of these avaranas. So please read this if it's something you want to explore more. Then the 5th circle of triangles, which has 10 triangles and is colored red. This is also the presiding deity of Lalita, or Tripura Sundari, and she has her own mantra for this circle of triangles. So when you're meditating, one of the ways to do it is to go through each of these circles of different triangles with the mantra. The next circle inside is also 10 triangles, and it's colored blue. Oh, pardon, it's colored 5th is red, 6th is blue. 10 triangles. This is called Sarva Rakshakara Chakra, and it has its own Bija mantra. The 7th, the 8 triangles. This is Harim, Harim, and Sao is the mantra. Okay, now the 8th, so we're very near now the inner triangle. So the 8th one, which has 8 triangles, you can count them from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is called the Sarva Siddhiprada Chakra. I'm not going to go through all the mantras, but you can read it. And then the 9th one is the Bindu inside. This is in the Shri M video that we saw, the secret mantra. And it's always nice also to look at it in Sanskrit, because some of the English translation of the letters, it's different depending on what book you read. So if you understand that in Sanskrit, certain letters and consonants are pronounced in different parts of the throat, in the mouth, once you understand that, you can read this much better, and your pronunciation will be more true. This is just a nice reference page to all the different ways to meditate upon the Sri Yantra.
Quick
Because
question.
you can look at the Sri Yantra.
Can you go back one slide? Ka'e Lahrim, is that Tripura Sundari's one of her mantras?
Yes, it is her mantra.
So she shares it with the Bindu. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, this is this is without the Harim at the end, it's the 15 count mantra, and it is the 16 count mantra when you have Harim on the end. So this is just for reference for you. Again, for very devout Hindus, this is a very important practice, and they have a very ritualistic way of meditating upon Sri Yantra. And then there's other ways to look at it. So I just wanted to give you a little cross section of it. The 9 avranas, or obstacles to self-realization, or different levels of consciousness. You can look at it different ways. Here are some nice YouTube references. And I really like the second one because this guy is so interesting. He's talking about the Meru. Remember it looks like the temple. And his discussion is really, really interesting. He's fun to listen to. The first 15 minutes are probably useful to you. I think it's a 20-minute video. The last 5 minutes, it's more into a religious talk about it. But the first 15 minutes, he's just giving you what each layer and level of the Meru, what it means in terms of your consciousness. So I wanted to step back from the Sri Yantra now and just look at some of the geometric forms that we find in yantras, whether it's a Sri Yantra or if we're looking at Tara or Kali or Bagalamukhi. So the main forms are triangle, circle, and square and variations thereof. And remember, the yantra is simply a two-dimensional or three-dimensional image or statue that holds energy. It holds a vibration. And you energize it with the mantra. So the triangle is interesting because it is a space that cannot be bound by less than 3 lines. So that's for that reason, it's called the sacred enclosure. And according to Tantra, it is the first symbol to emerge from the chaos. So what am I talking about chaos? Remember at the first diagram, we looked at Samkhya philosophy. We had Shakti and Purusha here. And the first thing that happened actually was the sound Om. And then duality and manifestation was all evolving. So the first form was triangle. This is the creative power of the feminine. This is the Shakti principle within this image of a triangle. The circle, again, are those cyclical forces. So it's not only that life is created and then dissolves and then it's created again, but a lot of times in Tantra, they talk about contraction and expansion. And in the Bindu, it is contraction to the smallest point, which is also an image of expansion into infinity. So it's a little paradoxical, but that's the Bindu. It also represents space. And if you think back, I'm sure you remember which goddesses represented space. The dot or the Bindu is a very important part of a yantra because it does draw your eye right there, and it represents the emergence of the Shiva Shakti concept. The square represents, as we saw in Sarah Tomlinson, the feet. Anatomically, in the human being, it's the feet, or it's the earth, or it is the grossest manifestation of the elements in Tantra of air, ether, fire, water, and earth. It also contains the 4 directional points. Again, we're looking at triangles, intersecting triangles of Shiva and Shakti. What I thought was interesting in this explanation was a fusion of polarities of static and frenetic into a state of harmony. And this is interesting because Shiva or Purusha is also thought of to be just pure consciousness still. And yet when we think about creation, then we're really talking about Shakti, Mother Divine, and there's all kinds of movement and all kinds of change, which doesn't occur in pure consciousness. So that's what they're talking about, the polarity of those 2 fields, I guess you could call it, that merge into harmonious one. Lotuses are interesting. So we looked at the 18 and 16 lotuses within the yantra already and what they represent. But in a more general meaning, and this will be helpful as you look at the other goddess yantras, generally it is the unfolding of different consciousness. So let's look specifically here. Here we have what they call the unfolding of the power of the divine essence. So according to Hinduism, a lotus springs from the navel of the god Vishnu, who gave birth to Brahman, who's sort of the god of all things within earth. The lotus is also the protector of your heart or the seat of yourself. So what does that mean? Again, in yoga, your heart is where true wisdom and true knowledge abides. It's where you can call it the heart center, or yourself with a capital S resides at the heart. The petals of the lotus are always going outward from the bindu towards the periphery of the yantra. So this symbolizes the movement, progression, development of how life expands out, how the life force, prana, is an expansive type of energy. This also represents how our consciousness can expand and become greater than just what is embodied within our body. That is part of the spiritual practice of Tantra, is to become aware of the different levels of consciousness that reside, that you have, that you inherently have. Any questions so far? Because now we're going more into the Kali mantra and really dissecting it and understanding the images here. Okay. So here we already, without even reading anything, we say, oh yeah, okay, I see the square, which means earth, the gross manifestations. I've got some downward triangles, meaning that's the Shakti. I've got lotus petals. I know the progression of my consciousness. The understanding of prana is expansive. I have the bindu. Okay, let's go a little bit further now. So here in the middle, you have the bindu, and then you have 5 triangles pointing downward. So those 5 triangles represent the 5 koshas. So for people who study yoga, you know what that is. If this is new to you, the koshas are called the 5 sheaths of the body. And you have the gross physical sheath, the body sheath, and then you have the energetic sheath, you have the mind, the intellect, and the spirit, or the bliss sheath. So this is represented within these 5 pointed triangles down. The 15 corners that are within these 5 triangles also represent something. They represent the tattvas. Again, we go back to the first day in that diagram of the evolutes of Prakriti. So here we have the 5 organs of sense, the sense organs, or they're called indriyas, remember? Smell, taste, sight, touch, hearing. Then we have the 5 organs of action for procreation, for excretion, locomotion, handling things, grasping, speaking. And then remember the tanmatras, smell, flavor, color, feeling, and sound. So all those things within that diagram are represented here within the corners of the 5 triangles. So it also represents the female regenerative power. And that refers back to, again, the cyclical nature of life. Then you have 2 circles around that triangle. Again, we're talking about the cycle of birth and death. And understanding the cycle of life, understanding time, understanding space, all things that are represented within the 10 wisdom goddesses, helps us understand, according to Tantra, the spiritual path of that union of Shiva Shakti. And I know I just said a whole bunch of words that may not make any sense. So let's see if we can say it again. When we understand the goddess Kali is the eternal present moment, that time in this tradition is not linear, but rather circular, and that ahamkara, that concept of division, which is part of Mother Divine, which is part of what we experience, is all just part of a play that we engage in so that we can develop our consciousness and our understanding enough to realize on the spiritual path that it is all one. And so we have to understand time, we have to understand space, we have to understand the role of the tattvas in our life. That's what this whole journey is all about within this yantra, or part of it. The 8 lotus petals in Kali yantra represent Prakriti. So again, we go back to the tattvas and the 5 elements. Remember, earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then we want to understand the antankarana, the manas, the buddhi, the ahankara. So what they're talking about here, antankarana, is also mahat. That all these things are part of Prakriti. So when you're looking at a yantra, understanding what this means intellectually can be very helpful, especially if that's the way you meditate. For other people, if they meditate more from the heart and more from intuition, perhaps the forms are going to be much more useful to them without having all the words attached to it. But this is how we can intellectually deconstruct the symbolism within a yantra. Here again is some of the diagram from the first day. If we need any remembering, help remembering.
Hey, Layla's got a question that I would actually love an answer to at this point too in the chat.
Yep, I'm gonna stop sharing and then go ahead. Question.
I just asked, I think it's absolutely fascinating and I love how everything ties back in. I was just wondering if it's one person's interpretation in particular, or whether it's a general interpretation that everyone not believes in, but whether it's the general interpretation.
Okay. What I have given you is the general interpretation, according to up to my study so far.
Okay.
All right. And what I really used a lot was this book. This guy is cited extensively in other people's studies, which is why I really trusted him. He is Madhukana, and I gave him, I think, in the first lecture and probably the first page of the Word document. I gave this.
Okay.
Yeah, I really trust him, and also a lot of the, not a lot, a bit of the reference was David Frawley, who is quite a scholar too. But I have found, and you're absolutely right, Layla, I have found that as I started studying the way people use the Shri mantra, that it's really different depending on what your background is. Like if it's pure Tantra or if it's Hinduism per se, and if this is part of, it's not a yogic practice, but rather a Hindu religious thing, they look at the Shri mantra different.
Okay. Yeah, I just think, the times that we've studied the Bhagavad Gita together or Patanjali Sutras, you see it interpreted by so many different people and it's like, wow, they're kind of getting to the same thing, but it's always a different interpretation. I was just wondering if it was one person's, but that looks lovely. No. Cool.
Yes, and I think that's why I also said we all have different personalities and way of understanding and intuition. So if you want to bring the Shri Yantra into your practice, I do encourage people to really, really delve deep into it. And it seems overwhelming at first because there's so much to know. But we have taken the path more of the tantric yoga. So I will say that definitely I'm looking at this from more from a tantric viewpoint than anything else. Okay. And I thought it was interesting that Sarah Tomlinson, who I gave her first interpretation was more of the human body. And so I thought, okay, wait, who is this person? So then I looked and I said, well, who is your guru? And then I read a little bit about him. He's got like a 5-syllable name. And then then I read, okay, who is who? Where's his lineage from? Because I think it's very personally, and I do echo other people, but personally for me, I think it's important to know in yoga who the lineage is. It's not that one lineage is better than the other, but that understanding really gives you a support and a fundamentals of the direction. Now you can change, but you don't want to just be floating around, I think, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
why I gave it like this.
Yeah.
Annette, you've read the book by Sarah Tomlinson. Maybe you have a comment.
My only comment around this would be that every spiritual tradition and every philosophy has an aspect of it that is based on sacred geometry, so called because it is sacred. The link between numbers, math, and a spiritual understanding, or a choice around a spiritual understanding. So for me, the practice has actually gone beyond any specific belief system or philosophy or method of meditation or anything like that, to the understanding of patterns, pattern recognition, the understanding that before zero or zero, there is infinity, and after infinity there is infinity. So you've got zero and infinity are the same things, which is basically reflected in what you said this morning. And in between, you have sacred geometry, you have numbers, and there are certain geometrical forms. They're called the 5 Platonic solids. And so you build up from there. I don't want to go into it because frankly, I get thoroughly confused. There's a point beyond which I cannot go. And people do. They take it to massive amounts of details and great long diagrams. But if you look at the Kabbalah, if you look at Christianity, meditative Christianity, which is a branch that a lot of people aren't aware of, obviously, you look at Taoism, you look at Hinduism, you look at Islam, you will find sacred geometry represented as part of the belief system. And I think it's because in the beginning of time, or in the beginning times, as we were developing our consciousness, the solids, the Platonic solids, the shapes of things and how they fitted together intuitively meant a great deal to the observers who develop these belief systems, whatever they may be. And I'm not taking any sides around that at all. When you look at things from a point of view of biology, you will see those same patterns. So if you study chemistry and you study physics, you will see exactly the same patterns. You won't call them a Sri yantra, you won't even call them a triangle, but you will understand that the nature of the forces that our world is made of are determined by physics, mathematics, and the understanding of geometry. And so there is a coming together. If you can get beyond the details, the specifics, and get to the underlying principle, you will find a commonality in all belief systems and in science. So that's my contribution to it.
No, thank you,
Don't
Annette.
get hung up on the details.
No, thank you, Annette, because Annette makes beautiful, beautiful chakras. Sharon, yes, you had a question. Sharon.
Yes, is it better if I speak like this? Yes, should I put my microphone on?
Yeah, put your mic on.
Can you hear me better?
More or less.
You all hear me okay?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, it's very interesting what Layla's question and also Annette's explanation. Yeah, I see Annette's point, and I can relate. Different cultures have observed and defined geometric shapes and the sacred geometric shapes in nature. And I see it in, well, there's different religion. Like we were in San Jose, California, and we went to a museum that reflects a different sect of Christianity, and it's based on geometric sacred, the pyramids of Egyptian times. And I think about Native Americans, Oglala Sioux, the chief of Oglala Sioux Nation, and how he find creationism and the geometric shapes and the orientation thereof. And I think it has to do with the early hominids. They lived and observed the natural world, and so it's not simple shapes, but like when they can configure straight lines, shapes from nature, the sun's rays, and it's energetic. It energizes their interpretation. So yeah, all of this discussion is so valid. But my question is, the tantric yoga and the yantras from a tantric yoga point of view, is that more from the scholars' perspective? Or if I were to go to India and talk to native people who are aware of tantric yoga, would they give me the same interpretation as the scholars?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. I think Leila has traveled in India, and Azadeh has lived in India, so we can get some answers. Oh, and Barbara has spent some time too. I really think it depends when you go to India, if you're talking to like a Vedic scholar versus a person on the street. Like where my family lives, they're mostly Hindu and Sikhs. And it's interesting because the Sikhs will observe the Hindu rituals ever so often and vice versa. And not everyone has the same academic education of the many, many different deities represented in Hinduism or Sikhism. Even in Sikhs, they know only the basics of their religion. So if you ask me, will the average person look at the Sri Yantra the way that we are studying it? I'm going to say no more, no less than we do. Like some of us have more of a background in this. And so you might say, oh yeah, I can name off the 108 deities, you know, for the Sri Yantra or whatever. And other people say, no, I just know that I like to use it for meditation and I understand that Shiva Shakti triangles. That's kind of what I'm just saying off the top of my head. Leila, you've studied and given courses there, right? And your partner is Indian?
Yeah, my partner's Indian, but I probably think similar to what you do, that some people might just use it as a tool for focusing the mind, and it doesn't matter about koshas or petals or any, I mean, you can see the petals, but yeah, I mean, when we did it last weekend, I just loved the fact that I was very, very concentrated, and it's nice understanding a bit more what things mean, but I don't know that you need to. I think that just as sacred geometry, it's enough.
Yep. I think you're right. I mean, what I like about the study group and what I like about this study for me personally is that everybody's mind is different and they gravitate towards different things. And I've even seen it, actually, some of you I've known for years now. I've seen it in the different questions that you ask, how you view something new that you've learned differently too. And that's been quite fascinating. And then it happens to me. Like in the beginning, well, first of all, I was the most non-spiritual person you've ever met in your life. Then once I got into it, I love the nitty-gritties. I really don't like to gloss over it. I love nitty-gritties. But I know there's other people that go, oh, just let me feel it. And that's where they get their power from it. So that's the lovely thing, like you just said. You can look at it and like you see the petals, you see the triangles, you get the 1-point focus and the calming of the mind, just making it and doing the practice. And that's lovely.
Yeah.
And then, and other people, or you even, I don't know, you may just love the whole detail. Like, I want to know how many corners are in this triangle. And that gives you added spiritual lift. So I don't know if that helps Sharon at all a little bit. Azadeh, you spent quite a lot of time in India.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add, because my experience was a little bit different. Back then, when I was living in a building with my landlord, and I saw the girls, it was actually their ritual in the morning to wash and clean the front gate on the street. And back then, I had no idea why they do that. They get their chalks and then they draw the sacred geometry. And I asked them many times, what does this mean? And because every day is a different ritual. They clean the street, and every house has got a different pattern that they put. And again, different months and different gods that they have, the rituals, again, it's another geometry. And when I asked the girls and the ladies, they didn't really look at it scientifically. It was something that they're offering to God, as in inviting that into their lives. That energy comes into their lives. But for them, it was a very basic explanation. They said, this is something to do with what we pray this week or this month, or it's to do with Holi, it's to do with these festivals that they go through. Every person is different. I'm sure if I asked that someone else, or other religions that they have also Christians and Muslims there, so they didn't have those patterns in front of their houses, but they had other shapes that they had around the gate. So it's beautiful. Every street you go, you can see how beautifully they live next to each other, and they have their own ways to express their view and how they have their life, so to say.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Azadeh, for telling us. That reminds me too. My family's Sikh, but I have one in-law. She makes the most beautiful colored chalk and rice chakra outside of her door on Navratri, this 9-day Hindu festival. And she's Sikh, but everybody does it. So there's so much interplay, and I'm almost sure she has no idea. Well, maybe a little idea, but I don't think she knows the nitty gritties of what she's making in the whys, and can name the Hindu goddesses in each corner, but they do it. So yeah. Karen, did you want to say something? Oh no, you're swishing. Okay. Barbara, you spent a lot of time in India too. Do you have something?
I feel the same way. I think it depends on the part of India you visit and their ethnic background. It's sort of like Christianity or being in Europe, and everyone has their focus, and you don't always question it. I mean, I worked with Gujaratis in the jewelry industry and mining, and everything was symbolism and colors and the geometry. But I live with Sikhs, and there was nothing of that. And then with the Hindu Punjabis, there was, you know, they would take things or have certain religious days. If you really delved into it and questioned them, it was, well, it's what we do. It's the way we were raised. It's right. It's not necessarily knowing every little bit about it. And my Muslim friends were the same. I mean, in the Muslim religion, because they don't use images, there's geometry everywhere, and everything from a carpet to the fabric to paintings everywhere. Color, I think people use it as beauty as well. It's, you know, it's not always questioning what you visually look at. It's like creating a gemstone. You know, we use it's very specific cutting in a very mathematical sense to create the beauty of it. If we miscut, the beauty is no longer there. And I think that's a lot if you look at the yantras, there's all this symmetry creates beauty to the eye.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks. Leila, also, if you look Just one
Can
second.
I just say one thing?
Mm-hmm.
Just relating back to what Barbara just said.
Uh-huh.
If one accepts that what is beautiful to one is something that harmonizes with your internal environment versus something that is in dissonance with your internal environment,
Mm-hmm.
then it all relates back to the
Uh-huh.
sacred geometry, because the vibration of all of those shapes is what makes us feel safe. It is what makes us feel comfortable, because it is what we are on a physical level, excluding all spiritual aspect at the moment, just speaking physics and math and biology. What those shapes will do for you, if they are just in your space, is every time you are looking at them or every time you are in the presence of them, your body, chemistry, your internal environment will start to synchronize with the harmony of the shape and the geometry.
Express. Thank you.
It's physics.
Nicely
Beyond that, I can't. You have to go down to quantum levels, and I can't do that. I have to stop when we get down to quantum. I can't get my head around it. But that's that on a very general level is the beauty of these practices, is that they harmonize your internal environment. They make you feel safe, and they open your mind.
No, nicely expressed. And that just goes right into, remember, the 10 wisdom goddesses in Tantra is life affirming. It is earth experience affirming. It is saying, take these physical experiences in life and use them to figure out who you are, who am I, right? And that just said it too, right from the very physical level, those vibrations that you feel within the sacred geometry. Oh, okay, you're using your physical body, which Tantra says, use it. Use your senses, all your organs, use the mind, use the intellect.
I'd love to say something, but I know that Sharon wants to say something first.
Okay, Sharon, go ahead.
I've already asked my question, so it's Karen's turn.
Thanks, Sharon. I just have to say, I mean, I've loved all of our gatherings and everybody's input every time, but today is especially like enthralling for me. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss, where spirituality and science meet, where physics and chemistry start to really merge with like the forces of our consciousness and also cosmology in the universe at large. And I just had this moment as Annette was speaking about like getting into harmony and using these shapes, where not to be too much of like a plug moment, but this is what draws me to acupuncture so much. This is what I adore about it, is that when I receive it weekly. And so in receiving and in also treating and in being of service, I can see how these shifts, I can feel how they happen and I can see how they happen. And especially with the infusion of intention, just how much that can help harmonize a person and just how quickly of a shift you can have in your consciousness thanks to it. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that. And also not to ever get too high and mighty and stay humble, but some part of me feels like some part of my purpose on this planet is to help resurrect acupuncture. So I just think it would be a wonderful exploration for anyone in this group to work with it in the same way that you would work with it, work with the goddesses or Tantra or the yantras. Just an invitation to try acupuncture in that way. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you, Karen. Well, okay, two things before I forget. Layla just left, but when you go over the recording again, Layla, you'll see that I put the reference for each slide. And one of them was Vedic something. So that's a really, really good paper that will give you their point of view, which I used for some of the symbolism today. And then on the first day, I gave you this book. This book I found really hard to read, but it is fantastic if you want to understand sacred geometry and yantras. It is really, really good. And then, of course, David Frawley, anything that guy has written, if you look at his book, of course, on tantric yoga, and then look at his Sanskrit book, you will really understand what Annette just alluded to, or not just alluded, she said, and also Kieran, about the vibrational frequencies, not only from sight, but from sound, but from just feeling, all these senses that we have and that we can use in our mind, all the energetics can come together in a practice.
There's a beautiful, if you Google sound vibration on sand on YouTube, I mean, it's incredible as it hits different decibels, the the yantras that are formed, the mandalas. Yeah, it just shows that how powerful sound is, and you know, even the tone that we use with people, what an impact that has.
Yep. No, thank you. That's true. The first time I saw that, I was also amazed. Like, I had no idea. It was beautiful.
And the neat thing about vibrational frequency is that we can create it. We can take ownership of it. And last night, I just had a moment when I wanted to try certain pranayamas, and I did. And I spent a lot of time practicing, and I did feel that very intimate, spiritual, vibrational frequency. So it is within us, and it just requires us to practice to get connected to that element.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Kieran and I just had that conversation because I had gotten away from my pranayama and mantra practice. And I was focusing on asanas, and I just didn't feel good. And I'm talking months. So I started doing it again these last 2 days. And like you said, just do it. Just do the practice. Now, whether or not I'm going to use the Sri Yantra or the 10 goddesses, I don't really know. But you're right. The whole vibrational frequency is powerful, powerful practice.
One of the teachings that came up for me this week with one of my mentors was the reminder of there is no try, there is only do, which is also a Yoda thing. Because I was talking to him about my meditation journey. I was like, just talking to him about it. And he's like, yeah, you just have to do it. You can't try to do it, you just do it. And it was a good reminder.
Yeah. Tomorrow, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Shakti Bija mantras and maybe a recap of the goddesses to round it off. So anything you'd like to share, any experiences you've had? I mean, it's also useful. It's also helpful when everybody shares their world experiences and what's been happening. I'd appreciate that. So anything else?
Yeah, can I just say one thing? Again, number 3 actually. I was listening to a conference. I sent you the link for it, and one of the reasons why I actually sent that to you was a specific talk by a guy called Richard Hansen, and he's a meditation teacher, but he's very involved with neuroscience, neurohistochemistry, and how the brain works, basically. But he's also come from a very strong Buddhist practice, and is very much a proponent of meditation. And he was the conference was on collective trauma and how we can resolve collective trauma in order to bring health to the world. And it's something that I believe in very, very strongly. Or it's a path that makes a lot of sense to me. And one of the things he said was, well, he talked about a practice that was very simple, and he called it the 3-breath practice. So the first breath that you breathe, you go into your body and you focus on the process of breathing. So that would be the equivalent in yoga to experiencing the breath when you're in your pranayama, at your nose and in your body. And he said that the reason that now that they know that when you focus on the internal environment of your body, there's a whole area of your brain that switches off. It becomes inactive. And it is the area that is responsible for critical thinking, analysis, personality, all of those kind of things that you really want to. So the first step, this one breath, by focusing on the body, switches off all of that. And he said, then the second breath, you think about, or you visualize love, or whatever your concept of love is, going out into the environment. And he said, when that happens, other areas of your brain start to re-engage, those associated with empathy and compassion. The third breath is when you bring it all back into you. So in other words, you bring that, it's the meta practice, but it's just divided into these three breaths. It's a lovely practice. I can tell you from experience, it's a lovely practice. But what was interesting for me was the knowledge now, the scientific knowledge behind, because they've examined people's brains when they're meditating, and they see how these different areas of the brain that produce specific neurotransmitters or endorphins or adrenaline and all of those kinds of things actually get deactivated or activated as a result of breathing, just breathing and where you place your consciousness. So I hope that that piece of information reaffirms for everybody here that adopting a practice like the 10 goddesses or whatever format you choose to follow, on a physiological level, on a purely, this is what it is for me, there is value in it, there is purpose in it, and it does work.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you.
Yes, Annette, and that is why it's so exciting for me that you guys are all so excited to do like a more like meditation-based 10 weeks in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
No, thank you. Thank you. Barbara, do you know that Swami Rama, who is the guru of Ganasan, right? He was one of the first yogis to be hooked up to different brain things that measure stuff. Speaking a little bit to what Annette was just saying. It was quite interesting too. So ladies, all good? All right, thank you everyone. This was really a nice session, and I know it was a lot of just kind of throwing information at you, but I'm hoping that it serves as a, either you're gonna say, I never wanna look at it again, or it's gonna be where you go, oh, let me delve further into this. And so I gave a lot of references in the recording that you could look at.
Yeah, thank you.
So let us all come to a nice seated position, hands to our heart center. And I like what Annette said. I think let's inhale, follow the breath. Exhale, feeling the love at our heart. Continue with your breath. May you know peace. May you know happiness. May you know love. All together, sharing Om one time. Take a breath in. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Inhale, opening our eyes. Exhale, releasing. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time. Thank you, everybody.